everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make music like Lorn. So, as usual, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, make sure to check there because they will be available. And yeah, let's dive in. So this is the loop you heard in the intro. The first sound I'm going to show you here is the lead, which sounds like this. So the way that I made this sound was with Ableton's analog. We have a saw wave, and then I have this pulse wave with a bit of the width on the pulse wave turned up. You can see I have it at 88%. So this is how you get that kind of like old school, like blown out, sort of like lo-fi synth sound that Lorn likes to use a lot. It's a combination of a saw wave and then this pulse wave with this kind of thing. And this is like a pretty popular sound. Obviously, Lorn isn't the only person to use this sound, but this is how you do it. So then after that, I have those going into this low pass filter, which has a bit of an envelope on it. You can see it set like that. And then I also have the LFO on here. So you can see that's moving a little bit. It's not doing a whole lot. I only have it on 0.29%. But I have this at a really slow rate. And it's just like sort of slowly opening and closing the filter over the course of the track. You can really hear it on those like long held out notes. So it's just kind of one of those things that helps to bring the sound to life. So then after that, I have the amplitude envelope set like this, so pretty similar to the filter envelope. And then to finish it off in analog here, I have a bit of vibrato to give it that kind of old school pitch warbly sound. It goes with the like lo-fi thing that I was talking about. And then I have a bit of unison on here as well, which helps to beef it up and give it like that really big sound. If I turn this off, it's just not quite as big. Like this really helps give it that big brassy kind of sound that you want. So yeah, so then after that I have this chorus, pretty straightforward. It's just giving the sound a bit more depth and stereo width. And then I have this EQ8, which is cutting out a bit of low mids because it was a little strong in the sound, and I just wanted to kind of, take that away a little bit and give it my own sort of personal touch. And then after that, I have the saturator, which you can see is actually doing quite a bit. So this is not the main distortion on the sound. I'll show you that in a second. But this is what's giving it most of the like grit and kind of changing it from this saw wave and pulse wave combination into something a little bit more, I guess, tailor-made for this. Like, it's just kind of giving it a little bit of a different edge. Here it is without it. And then with it. So yeah, I feel like that's just something that helps tie it all together. And then after that, we have this reverb, which is pretty straightforward. That's what's giving it the reverb. And then I have that going into an EQ8, which is cutting out some low mids, boosting a little bit of kind of like higher mid stuff. And then I'm also giving it this high-end boost because if you look at this, you can see those high highs are kind of missing a little. So yeah, I just added that to sort of bring them back. So then after that, we have this drum bus. This is the main distortion on the sound. You can see I have the crunch all the way up, the drive all the way up, and I have it on the hard setting. So yeah, this is definitely doing a lot. So here it is. And then if I turn it off, it's definitely a lot more thin, a lot less like powerful. This is what gives it that like big anthemic brassy kind of sound. So then after that, I have two side chains on here. And the reason for this is because the drums are sort of going like however, the kick isn't hitting on that second note, the second half note. And I wanted to have that like pulsing pattern, like that kind of like that with the volume. So what I did was I sidechained to the kick and then to the snare. So then I'll briefly show you the notes for this as well. It's basically just following the chord progression, which is F sharp, A sharp, and then D sharp. And then I was just kind of adding these extra melody notes on top. And if you notice too, like these are actually mostly notes from the chords. For example, this one is just A sharp, which is the major third of F sharp, and my first chord is an F sharp major. So yeah, it's kind of just like taking notes from chords and spreading them out like that. So then the next sound that we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. And so this sound is also pretty simple. It's just playing the root notes of those chords that I was just talking about. And I made this one with operator. So what we have is we have two saw waves I'm using this FM algorithm, so they're not being FM'd at all. They're just playing side by side. The second one is detuned a little bit, and then those are going into this low-pass filter, which is cutting off a lot of the high end, but not all of it. So here it is with no effects. You can kind of hear. Here it is with no filter. And then when I turn the filter on, you can hear it. Like I said, it's not cutting out a whole lot of that high end, but it's just cutting out enough that the distortion wouldn't be a little bit too hard. That was kind of what I was trying to do, was just sort of temper this to the distortion so it wouldn't have too many problems. So then after that, I have this chorus on here, very similar to the lead, just gives it some more depth. And then I have that going into this amp, which I set to the rock mode, and I turn the treble down, and I set the output to this dual mode. So by default, it comes in this mono mode, which isn't really good when you have chorus going into it, because if you listen, it's in mono, so we don't get any of the stereo depth that the chorus is giving. So if you just click that, it sets it to a stereo mode, and there we go. So then after that, I just have these two compressors side chaining into the kick and the snare, just like the lead. And then I have this EQ8 just cutting out a bit of high end. I felt like it fit a little bit better into the mix this way, so that was why I added that at the end of the chain. So then the next sound we have here is the second lead, which sounds like this. So this was made with Operator. What I did was I used a saw wave and then a square wave. And then those are not being FM'd at all. Same FM algorithm as the bass, where they're just playing side by side. Those are going into a bandpass filter, which is set like this. So it's just kind of honing in on a certain frequency range. And yeah, just like sticking them to it. And then I also have this LFO on here on the pitch. So you can see it's only on 5%. It's very subtle. But this is just giving it that like pitch warble throughout the course of the sound. And it just helps to give it some character. So then after that, I have a bit of reverb. Pretty straightforward. You can hear that on the sound. And that's going into the saturator, which I'll show you what this is doing. This is actually what's giving the sound most of its kind of like texture. If I turn this off and then turn it on, you can hear it's really driving it and like blowing it out in a nice way. So this is what this is for. I just have to drive up there, and then the bass frequency on this analog clip is up pretty high, which I think is what's giving it a lot of that like really, gritty distortion. So then after that, I just have it sidechained to the kick and the snare, just the same as the bass and the lead. So then the next thing I'm going to show you here are the drums, which sound like this. And so I have a bit of processing on the group, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I want to start with the individual drums. More specifically, the kick. So the kick is made up of 3 layers. It sounds like this on its own. So you can hear it's kind of like this big warehousey, almost like a techno kick actually. But this is something that I heard in a lot of Lorn's tracks, so I wanted to try to recreate it as faithfully as I could, and I think I got pretty close. And what it boils down to is, like I said, 3 layers. So the first one we have here is sort of like a more low-end, low-mid impact. This is what it sounds like. So yeah, that's more of like in the low end, and it's more of an impact, but it's not like super low and ringy. It's not the thing that's giving it like that rumbly release that we were hearing a second ago. This is just to beef up the kick a bit. So the next layer is this one, which is more of like the high end part. It has a bit of low end as well, but it's mostly like the click of this kick sound. So those two together sounds like this. And then finally, we have the low sort of rumble layer, which sounds like this. So this is what's giving it that like techno kick kind of sound. And so the way that I made this was with actually the original kick. So I basically took this kick 1 here and just put it on a new track by itself. And then what I did was I put 3 main effects here. So I'll show you. Here it is with the first one, which is this reverb. And the way that I set this reverb was I turned the pre-delay all the way off and then turned the dry wet all the way up, which is important because since this is a kick and you want it to hit on a certain thing, you got to get rid of that pre-delay, and then, yeah, it'll be fine. So that was what I did, and then I have a bit of decay time, and then what this is doing is it's going into this amp, which sounds like this. So you can hear that's adding a lot of stuff in the high end that's kind of weird. But more importantly, it's also beefing up that low end and bringing out that like low rumbly stuff. So then after that, I added this low pass filter, and that's kind of like the final thing. So then we just have like a nice low rumble that sits really well under these other two kicks. And like really completes the sound. Now there's one more thing I added on here, which was a low end boost, because something about Lorn's tracks that I actually quite admire is when he does use these kicks, they have a lot of low end. And these kicks don't really tend to have like a lot of low end, because just putting reverb into a distortion doesn't really always make the most precise low end. Like it kind of just makes a rumble, which is what you want. But then to fine tune it a little bit, I just boosted the low end a little bit, basically, to just kind of give it that nice, like, more powerful, yeah, kind of like low end. So then the next thing that I will show you is the snare, which sounds like this. So the snare is two main layers. It's this sort of layer, and then this one. So that first one is like a Foley kind of sound, with a bit of reverb on it. You can hear that's sort of like the main like crack of the snare. Like this is more in the mids, but that's what gives it that like really audible like clickiness. And it also has that little bit kind of going into it as well, which helps to bring the snare to life. And again, like gives it that like Foley kind of sound vibe. And then the second one is more of just like a punch layer. Like you can hear it doesn't have any reverb on it. It's actually pretty quiet too. It didn't really need to be that loud, I found. But yeah, it's just on there adding a bit of punch. And then I also have this little thing which comes in every 4 bars. It's just like a little Foley sound that I reversed. And then you can see all I did was I reversed it and then I just lined it up with the start of the snare there. Pretty straightforward. So then the last drum sound before I show you what's on the group is this little cymbal thing which sounds like this. So the way that I made this was I took this cymbal sound and I actually pitched it down -19, so very low, but it just gives it like that low droning kind of like, that kind of like percussion. Like this could really be done with a ton of different sounds. It's just the cymbal was the first one that I went for. You just need something that's kind of like that, that's like a high percussion. And then you just pitch it down a bunch. And then if you filter it like I did where I cut out the low end, it just gives you that nice kind of, like I said, like just low-key background percussion. Whereas if we take this and like put it at the original pitch, I don't think it works quite as well. So yeah, that's definitely important. And then another thing that I did on this, every 4 bars you can see, is I added this little reverse one. So all I did was, I'll show you. If this is like a regular one, I just duplicated it and then reversed it, and then it goes. There we go. Very simple. So yes, those are the drums. And then on the drum group here, I have this drum bus, so I didn't really do too much with it. I mostly just use it for the crunch and the drive, to be honest with you. Basically I just turned the crunch up a bit and turned the drive up a bit, and it just helps to glue everything together. You can hear like the saturation from the crunch and the drive just really like put everything in its right place. I feel like it just really brings this to life. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one. Like I said, the main things to think about are like with the lead, just trying to do stuff to give it that kind of like old school synth, sort of like super epic kind of feel. And then like with the bass, just doubling up what the lead is doing in the low end. And then with the drums, like the stuff I was saying with the kick and layering your snares, and then like the cool pitch down percussion. So that is going to be it for this tutorial. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Check out my sample packs which are on the screen right now, as well as my social media. And yeah, thank you again everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.